Welcome. I'm Jonathan Foust, and I'm glad you are here for this webcast. Wonderful to imagine your presence. And interesting little topic tonight. We're going to talk about the nature of awakening. It's a topic I love. So before that, we're some announcements, some thank yous, a short meditation, a little centering, and then we'll kind of dive into this. At any rate, first of all, a big thank you to you for making the time to be here. A big thank you to our producers, to Glenn Harrison and Leo Gimo, for putting all this technical wizardry together so that we are having this experience right now in the space-time continuum. A big thank you to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for all that they do. This is their end-of-year fundraising, IMCW.org, if you're inspired to help them continue to do the amazing work that they do. A shout out to my friends at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington. Say that fast 4 times. And as well, a big thank you to our Mindful Movement teacher, to Rita Moran, to our Mindful Dialogue leaders, to Ray Manioki and Tara Cassidy. The whole Monday night experience, 6:30 p.m. if you are so drawn, Eastern Standard Time, Mindful Movement with Rita, help get you set up and prepared for the meditation and talk. And afterward, facilitated conversation held by Ray and Tara, masterful folks, wonderful way to connect with like-minded people. So important in these trying times. I have a newsletter, monthly newsletter with a compendium of my talks and my best photography for the month. And there's a weekly as well, where I give you a little shot across the bow as to what's coming up for the next week. I'm going to be leading a day-long retreat on January 14th about mindful intention. So if you're not interested in having a mindful intention for this next year, don't bother. If you are, come on down. It's going to be, it's a great retreat. It's an annual retreat, and I just find it so helpful to reflect on the year and to really drop in, change your state, and get a sense of what's calling you in the future. That's available as well. And finally, this is all offered freely, following the tradition, the teachings of the Buddha. These practices, these experiences, these teachings are considered priceless, and therefore, he said, there should be no charge. I really like that. Anyone can get access to this, and your support makes that available for everyone and also supports me in my lavish lifestyle, where I can have the time to put these experiences together, which I really love. So grateful. Alrighty then, let's take some time to get ourselves centered. And one of the most wonderful ways to do that is to kind of amp up sensations, because your body, as you may know, only lives in the here and now. So when you are present to sensation, you've arrived. You might want to reach your arms up overhead, stretch up to the left side, the right side, open your jaw wide, let out any sounds. How might you adjust your posture? This meditation is not too long, so let's see if we can follow these practices around. Focus, developing some concentration and arriving, opening up into open monitoring, being aware of what's changing, and then resting in presence. So, again, let the body sway a little bit to the left and right. Where's that midline place? You might sway a little bit back and forth. And again, just sense, where's the center line, the plumb line? And you might also want to sense what it's like to relax through the back of your neck. And imagine a lengthening through the back of the neck, almost like a little string pulling right up from the center of your head. And you might notice that brings in a sense of alignment as well. And here, with the eyes closed, take a few moments to acknowledge this gesture of turning inward, moving from focus on the outer world, heightening awareness of the inner world. And now, one of the most profound things that you can do in meditation is to dedicate a few minutes to willful breathing. Willful breathing is a concentration technique. It not only helps you to focus, but it begins to shift your physiology. One of the most simple and profound ways is to now lengthen the next inhalation to the count of 4 or 5, and then glide right into the exhalation to the count of 4 or 5. Inhale to the count of 4 or 5. And exhale to the count of 4 or 5. And continue now as focused as you can be on matching the length of the in-breath with the length of the out-breath. You'll notice it takes a lot of concentration. The mind will want to hop off into a narrative. If it does, just bring it right back, matching the length of the in-breath with the length of the out-breath, slow and deep. As you continue now, explore what it's like to smooth out your breath. Let the breath be continuous and smooth. Notice as well if you can begin to, on the exhalation in particular, to sense what could relax or soften or let go. Feel the inside of the mouth. Feel the backs of the hands. And feel from the inside out the soles of the feet and the heels. And as you're ready now, on the next exhalation, release any control of the breath and sense if you can bring that same quality of attentiveness to the inflow and the outflow of your breath. Breath is easy, unrestricted, free-flowing. Arriving even more intimately, notice if it's possible to relax all expression. Let all expression on your face just soften and melt away. Feel the eyes and the muscles around the eyes. And the back of the head and the base of the skull. And sense from the inside out the weight and the volume of your arms. You might imagine your arms like heavy drapes hanging from your shoulders as you sense down through the elbows and down through the wrists. And you might feel from the inside out the palms, the fingers and thumbs. Sensing from the inside out the lower back and the buttocks. The belly and the lower abdomen. and down the length of the legs. Tops of the feet and the toes. And again, soles of the feet and the heels. And is it possible now to relax or soften on the inside? And gently let your attention move to your breath or to sound or the feeling in the palms. And for the next few minutes, let this be your doorway back to the here and now, the experience from the inside. You might sense as well the background. If you like, you can broaden and widen your attention, noticing this entire field of change, 360 degrees. Being the witness or the observer, noticing what's happening and allowing it to happen. In this remaining minute or so, how much more could you relax right now? Is it possible to let things be just as they are, both relaxed and alert? You might again notice where you feel the breath on the inside and slowly, gently lengthen and deepen the breath. Again, sensing this quality of being deeply relaxed at the same time alert. Notice the sounds around you. And if you like, you might now let your body move and stretch in any way that feels good. And feel free to adjust your posture in any way, to open your eyes, or you might like to remain with your eyes closed. Classic teaching story. There once was a beggar who sat on a box by the side of the road for many, many years. Day in and day out, swarms of strangers would pass him on their way, and the beggar did what all beggars do: ask for money. One day a traveler was passing through town, and the beggar shouted, "Please give me some money." The traveler said, "Sorry, I don't have any money to spare, but I'm curious about your box." "Well, what about my box?" "Well, what's in it?" "I don't know. It's just an old box I found here, and I've been sitting on it for years." Persistent in his inquiry, the traveler once again asked what was in the box. The beggar replied, "I've never looked." The traveler said, "Well, why not?" "Because there's nothing in there," the beggar said. The traveler responded, "Well, let's take a look, shall we?" And finally, to appease the traveler's insistence, the beggar split the box open, and amazingly, a treasure of gold burst onto the ground. He had been sitting on it for years and never even knew it. And off the traveler went. So, a couple morals to that story. What treasure are you sitting on? What does it take to open that treasure? I also thought another moral would be, if you see someone sitting on a box, offer them a couple bucks for the box, because you'll never know what's in it. But the truth is, when we look within, there is incredible richness inside. You know, all these great teachings say everything you seek is found within. To understand the cessation, the creation of the cosmos, simply look within the body. There's tremendous joy that you can unleash by focusing within, but there's also tremendous truth to encounter. Sometimes very, very difficult. You may have heard about the time when Kermit the Frog was getting x-rayed. The physician is looking at the x-ray and he sees a human hand inside. He says to Kermit, "What I'm about to tell you is going to change your life. Are you really sure you want to know?" I crack myself up. I really love that one. So what's the goal of meditation practice? To be a better person, to be happy, to be more content, to be more efficient, less reactive, to be completely liberated from stress and suffering? All of the above? As I've often said, I kind of see this as two paths. There's a path of self-improvement, and then the path of liberation. The path of self-improvement is about being a better person, about being a better listener, about getting in shape, about really knowing what you want, being more effective in the world, aligning your intention with your actions. It's all great stuff. And then the path of liberation is really the path of cutting through. Who are you? To know who you are. These paths are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but there are different trainings, different philosophies that will orient you in different ways. And different traditions speak of self-realization, of awakening, of enlightenment. This whole thing around enlightenment, what is that? And for me, who am I to talk about enlightenment? Not being a fully realized being. I just want to let you know that whatever I share here is probably deeply and intimately suffused with ignorance and projection and hallucinations. But I hope it might be helpful. I do believe I've had glimpses in my life, glimpses in my practice. And what's interesting is we tend to think of enlightenment as this extraordinary experience. But when you listen to what those who say they're enlightened or have touched enlightenment or have been around awakened and enlightened beings, they pretty much all say it's not what you think. It's not what you expect. It's not extraordinary. It's actually just the recognition of nature itself. They also claim that no one has exclusive access to the nature of their own mind. That these moments or glimpses of awakening can have extraordinary side effects, but they're not necessarily momentous. It's more like just arriving in truth. So what I'd like to share with you, is first about some of the definitions of awakening, a little bit on the work, the effort required for awakening, and the surrender required for awakening, and a little bit on what it means to be awake in the world. And again, keep in mind, all this is hallucination and projection on my part. But if you look at enlightenment stories from around the world, it's fascinating stuff. One of the most powerful books that I ever read was a book called Mysticism by Evelyn Underhill. And it was a study of mystics throughout the ages from different cultures. And what became pretty clear, at least to me, was the transcendent experience, like into the mystical experience, is absolutely the same for everyone, no matter what century they lived in, no matter what their culture was. But the return was expressed through the language of their day. It was expressed through their religion. It was expressed through their sexuality. And that I found really, really helpful. When we transcend duality, we have a common experience. But when we come from the one back to the two, that's when all the different expressions come into play. There's a beautiful example from Thich Nhat Hanh. It said, when you go into a beautiful garden, the life force is moving through all these plants, but the expressions are infinite. There's that phrase I love, that there's oneness, there's just pure presence. And then it moves from 1 to 2, and then from 2 to 10,000. The expression of presence, of consciousness, of whatever you want to call it, becomes kind of overwhelming, can be overwhelming. So we know the story of the Buddha. You may know the story of the Buddha. Just to encapsulate it quickly, a life of privilege, life of feeling protected, and then the spark to know truth. And the spark for truth was this experience of the heavenly messengers, recognizing that everyone becomes sick, everyone becomes old, everyone dies. And then coming across a sannyasi, coming across a renunciate, someone who had dedicated himself to awakening, who had a quality of joy that intrigued him. That started him off, and his path started as a very, very willful path about overcoming and taming the body, taming the passions, and denying the body, the asceticism, and then recognizing that while that was providing powerful experiences, they weren't liberating, which opened him to this idea, the path of the middle way, not too tight, not too loose, about opening to presence itself. So what did he awaken to? When we hear the enlightenment story of the Buddha, what happened? Well, he saw initially into the Four Noble Truths. The truth that when you come into a body, stress and suffering is part of the human experience. And also, secondly, that there's a cause of that stress and suffering. If you look closely at your stress, at your suffering, you will find there's some form of identification, some kind of clinging, some kind of holding on. The third noble truth, that it's possible to let go. It's possible to let go of that attachment, of that clinging, of that identification. And when you do, opening into a greater sense of presence, freedom, happiness, recognition. And the fourth, that there's a path to awakening. There are practices, there are observations, there are teachings that can support you along the way. He saw pretty clearly into the nature of karma, that what you do, what you say, what you think does matter. He saw into the nature of what's called dependent co-arising, how phenomena come into being, the 12 links that set up the chain of existence. He saw into the nature of reality itself, which he described as 3 factors. The first, impermanence. That anything born out of causes and conditions is subject to change. The second, of stress or suffering, anything that you attach to the degree you attach or bind yourself, to that degree you will experience stress and suffering. And third is a profound insight into the nature of the self, the recognition of the conditioned self, of who you are as a culture, as a product of your culture, your upbringing, all of that. But also seeing into the nature of the unconditioned self, that transcendent self. And ultimately, what that points to is the concept of no self. So, how do we awaken? Well, I think this is a good point. Awakening arises from qualities you can cultivate and be proud of. Awakening arises from kindness, from sensitivity, from equanimity, from non-judging awareness, from conviction, from determination, from wise discrimination, wise discernment. These are all noble qualities to cultivate, and these set the stage. They're the fertile ground for awakening. And very different from what some cultures tell us, relying on aggressiveness, on self-aggrandizement, on dishonesty. So part of this practice of awakening is about cultivating the conditions that can allow awakening to occur. And that can create this sense of freedom. So again, freedom from what? What does it mean to be free? A short reflection. If you like, you can close your eyes. Not, of course, if you're driving right now. And if you would, take 3 slow, deep breaths. And imagine, if you would, who you are free from greed and wanting. Imagine who you are free from hatred or judgment or blame. Imagine who you are, if just for a moment, free from any sense of confusion. Another element that the Buddha observed in his awakening was that freedom was freedom from these 3 elements. Fundamental elements of greed, hatred, and delusion or confusion. If you like, you can deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes. There's something so clean and so helpful that when you recognize that any time there is any element of greed, of wanting, of attachment, of fantasy, of planning, you are not free. Any moment that you are touched by that mental coloring of hatred, aversion, anger, judgment, ill will, you're not free. Anytime you're lost in delusion, believing things that are true when they're not, believing things that aren't true when they are, you're not free. This teaching of what sometimes, it's too strong a word, but it's culturally used as the three poisons of the mind: greed, hatred, and delusion. They reveal what's between you and feeling free. So what are then the characteristics of someone who's awake? And you might like to, this is a kind of a long list that I came up with, and you might like to close your eyes or just as I read these, kind of imagine these qualities, imagine these little software elements installed in your operating system. Characteristics of an awakened being. Attention on the present moment. Less reactive, seeing more clearly. A sense of being home, regardless of where you are. An enhanced appreciation of the good, seeing the good in things. Empathy, the capacity to feel and perceive what others feel. A non-judging mind. An increased sense of joy, and not only joy for yourself, but your capacity to feel joy for others. No fear of death. Indifference toward fame. Quality relationships without clinging. A perception that every moment is now. And even though psychic abilities may arise, a disinterest in them. A disinterest in clinging to a spiritual path. And with that, a deep contentment with the ordinary. An ability to adapt and experience different viewpoints. And finally, not considering yourself special. These qualities can sometimes feel completely out of reach. And yet at the same time, I would bet good money that you have experienced that place inside, where all these qualities are either present or you can just sense the possibility of them. There's so many ways that enlightenment or awakening is described. Traditionally, it's described as what it's not. It's not greed, it's not fear, it's not hatred, it's not delusion. But here's an interesting quote I'd like to read. About the warning from spiritual teachers that every single thing you imagine yourself to be is a clever lie, constructed by a psychological defense mechanism against the existential truth of impermanence. In other words, you are not who you think you are. That's pretty funny, isn't it? However, laughing about it, not taking yourself seriously, is another wonderful coping mechanism to be able to digest such seemingly harsh truths. As Longchenpa says, you may as well burst out laughing. Or as a modern Zen master, Adyashanti, explains, we realize, often quite suddenly, that our sense of self, which has been formed and constructed out of our ideas, beliefs, and images, is not really who we are. It doesn't define us. It has no center. people over the millennia have done all kinds of experiences to try to find out that source of freedom, what it means to be free, what it means to be awake, what it means to be enlightened. Tremendous willful effort, explorations, and just deep surrender. And I think one of the qualities we can cultivate is a sense of wonder. A sense of just simply loving the mystery. Another element that I've found, and I've mentioned this in the past, but it's just hot it's just sort of like hanging out there in my prefrontal cortex, is the possibility that enlightenment is simply the absence of desire. And when you try that on, you might want to try that on just for a moment. If you close your eyes and take 3 breaths and explore this question. Who are you right now in the absence of desire? And if you like, you can open your eyes, only if you desire to. I like that inquiry for myself because it has a way of giving me a glimpse, just a moment of nothing. There's nothing to want. There's nothing outside of this moment. There's nothing to add. There's nothing to take away. A glimpse. So how do we cultivate these glimpses? The classic sort of cliche is that enlightenment is an accident and meditation makes you accident prone. Well, some of the approaches. Here's one approach. And this approach really comes from this place of strive, be diligent. Put in your time, put your effort into your practice. Deny the wild, wanting mind. Now, there's a lot of power that comes here. Huge amount of power. I just finished a week-long retreat, and as I've said, maybe ad nauseum, one of the most powerful things about being on a retreat, it's not what I do during that retreat, it's what I don't do. I don't spend my time online. I don't get sucked into everything that happens online. That frees up all this time, all this sort of psychic energy. So I gave myself fully to this path. Again, many, many years ago, but it was a path of really the path of renunciation. I renounced my name. I took on a new name. I took on a poverty vow. I was celibate for 6.5 years. Actually, I was six years, 6 months, 4 days, and 3. No, it was about 6.5 years. I only read original scripture for, 12, 13 years, my beloved New Yorkers. I worked 6.5 days a week, and I spent hours and hours and hours of practice. And I got so much out of those practices, so much. So the lights turned on inside, and I kind of thought that it would only be a matter of time before all the lights would fully turn on. I had massive shifts, massive insights, rushes of intense happiness. With that as well, an awareness of deeper kind of undigested wounds and undigested feelings and so forth. A lot of that practice of renunciation, of stepping back from the world, not engaging in the world, was about developing what we call witness consciousness, the capacity to observe without judgment. There's greater freedom for me, and the simplicity of my life brought up so much richness. And I really understand why people live in caves. At the end of my first month-long Vipassana retreat, when I started to experience the jhanas, like the deeper states where this upwelling of joy just from sitting, I would give anything to keep that going. I understand why saints are silent. There's this whole thing about how everyone on their way to enlightenment at some point practices silence. And I realized that it's not a discipline. Breaking silence is almost unbearable. So what's really interesting is this arising of the witness, the arising of witness consciousness, is freeing yourself up from your conditioning to see more clearly what's true. And as I said, for many, many years, my practice was about cultivating that sense of the witness, being more aware of the stream of sensation, the stream of thought, the stream of the flow of consciousness. When you begin to recognize, and we all recognize this at different times, that you're not your thoughts, that you are the one who is aware of the thoughts, it gets really, really interesting. And yet, as much as for me, it was about cultivating the sense of the witness and all the incredible insights come with it, what's behind the witness? Is there anything behind that witness? And that becomes a deepening part of the practice. So I want to offer a short little reflection here. If you like, again, you can close your eyes. And just imagine for yourself what it means for you to take this seat of the witness. You might just take a few moments to sense where you feel the breath on the inside. And just notice how intimately can you feel the next breath. Notice the sounds that are happening right now, 360 degrees. How intimately can you experience the sound vibrations as they're happening? Now, can you locate the witness? Is it possible to sense the location of this observer? For many people, they might sense it in the head, behind the eyes, sometimes other places in the body. And take a moment just to sense its location. And then ask yourself this question. What is it that is aware of this location? And you might invite that location to soften or dispel. And imagine now, can you locate the sense of the witness or the observer now, somewhere in the field of your energy body? And what is it that is aware of this location? And invite that to soften or dispel. Notice anything that may have shifted for you in this inquiry. And as you're ready, you might deepen the breath. If you like, you can let your eyes open, or feel free to remain with them closed. one element of practice is noticing what's happening as it's happening. Are you aware of the sensations right now? Are you aware of the thoughts? Are you aware of awareness? And what's interesting is when you turn your attention toward what it means to be aware of awareness, it's not a focus. It's more of an allowing. And this is interesting because awareness is already here. The body is not aware. Awareness is aware of the body. So willful training, willful practice helps you to kind of snap out of the trance of thinking, period. It also snaps you out of the trance of thinking that you're separate, thinking that you're your thoughts, thinking that you're your body. And I find with the meditation practice that includes willful practice, it helps us to snap out of the trance. You're lost in thought, you recognize you're lost in thought, you come back to your breath, or you come back to sound, you re-arrive. You do that enough times, over time, the out-of-control puppy of the mind begins to sit for longer and longer periods. It's also helpful sometimes to set off depth charges, to kind of shock the system into a new view, doing a retreat, doing different practices. It's a way of sort of like strengthening your capacity to cut through delusion, believing things are true when they're not true. And yet, to be aware of awareness is not a willful practice. The only time you can move into being aware of awareness is to really soften, open, widen, to open in the presence. So willful is important. But there's this quote that says, enlightenment must be a profound state of laziness. Have you ever seen a statue of the Buddha jogging? There's something to that. I've never seen a statue of the Buddha jogging. So, what kind of practices help you to awaken? What kind of practices will open you to being aware of awareness, being awareness itself? Thich Nhat Hanh says this: I laugh when I think of how I once sought paradise as a realm outside the world of birth. It is right in the world of birth and death that the miraculous truth is revealed. But this is not the laughter of someone who suddenly acquires great fortune. Neither is it the laughter of one who has won a victory. It is rather the laughter of one who, after having painfully searched for something for a long time, finds it one morning in the pocket of her coat. We strive and we strive, we push, we begin again, and eventually we kind of give up. And it's a cosmic giving up. It's not necessarily a throwing in the towel out of revulsion, although I have done that many, many times. And it's actually really beautifully summed up in a story that comes from the yoga tradition that I was part of for many, many years, a story about Swami Kripalanandaji. And the story goes like this. He had very, very, very profound awakenings. Many would say kind of a Kundalini awakenings, where he would just feel so much energy flowing through him that for some people, when they have these profound awakenings, they walk and they walk and they walk. And part of it is that when you kind of release this energy, this is the concept, just a concept, when this universal energy at the base of the spine opens, you're flooded with so much energy that people will just spontaneously walk because you're balancing out the hemispheres of the brain. You're balancing out your system, and you're clearing out all the blocks to that energy. Well, he gave himself deeply to willful practice. He meditated for 10 hours a day for his whole life. Was in silence, I believe, for 19 years, completely focused. So he was once staying in a village in India. I believe it was near the Narada River. And people would kind of keep an eye on him because he'd have so much energy and so much light coming through them. He would just get up and he would walk. And in the middle of a meditation, the Narada River at that time was in flood stage. He got up and he walked right out into the river during the monsoon. And something in him, in the middle of the river, realized that he was about to drown. So he started struggling, trying really, really hard to keep his head above water. And he heard his teacher's voice say, "Let go." And he struggled harder, and he heard his teacher's voice say, "Let go, let go." And at some point, he let go, and he floated on his back, and he went into, according to his story, he went into a profound state of bliss. And he floated miles and miles down the river in a state of profound samadhi, insight, awakening. That story is so profound because eventually we have to give up. We know this. You have to give up your body. Everyone you know and love is going to vanish at some point. We know we have to let go. Doing that in our practice becomes a very, very profound doorway to this sense of awakening or enlightenment. And non-doing is, for many people, a terrifying practice. We're all about doing, and so much of my life has been about doing better. I'm one of those life hack people. And there are times I've kind of explored, well, how do I let go better? I once did a retreat, and it was one of the most profound retreats ever. 3-day retreat in the ashram where I lived, and the teacher, his name was Rishi Prabhakar from India, and he started off the retreat saying, "For this retreat, I want you to do nothing." We were so hypervigilant, so scared about not getting awakened in this lifetime. We all took notes, and so I wrote that down. I was sitting up front, and he saw me and other people taking notes. He said, "No, for this retreat, I want you to do nothing." So I wrote it down and I underlined it. And then he said, "Put the pens down, put your paper down. For this retreat, I want you to do nothing." And we were in grids. We had like little squares where we would hang out for the whole retreat. And the practice was do nothing. One of the profound insights for me was when I caught myself thinking, I wonder if I'm doing nothing better than she's doing nothing. We are so drawn to being somebody special, to doing. And I have to say that retreat was one of the most profound retreats that I have done. A level of relaxation I had not touched into maybe ever, because I was pretty wired into investing into my production as a way of measuring my worth. So how do you let go? How do you do nothing? And there's no how. The teacher Rupert Spira says, how do you take a step toward yourself? You can take a step toward the wall. The only thing you can't walk toward is yourself. So part of it, and just a few minutes left, part of this is the analogy. Imagine you're playing King Lear in a play. The first step is you recognize you're playing the role. You're not King Lear, you're playing the role. The second step is you look into the nature of you to recognize that who you are is awareness. You are awareness itself. I didn't make it through as much as I wanted to share, but that's life. We do have a couple minutes left. I love to lead a short meditation, just to kind of maybe bring this to somewhat of a sense of closure. So if you like, you can close your eyes. This will be just a few minutes before we close. And if you close your eyes, bring all of your attention to the sense of your breathing. And you might lengthen the in-breath and lengthen the out-breath. So this is kind of a willful breathing. Breathing a little bit deeper than you might naturally would. Match the length of the in-breath with the length of the out-breath, just for the next 4 or 5 breaths. And notice, perhaps, how this willful effort is gathering your attention. It's creating a deeper sense of absorption, a sense of here and now. And now relax the breath. Let the breath be free flowing. And over these remaining minutes, you might just follow my prompts. Can you be aware of your breathing right now? Can you be aware of the sounds right now? Is it possible to be aware of touch, the air against your skin, the pressure points? Can you be aware of taste and smell right now? Can you be aware of the light beyond your closed eyes, or if your eyes are open, to be aware of the visual? Is it possible to be aware of the process of thinking, the narrative? Can you be aware of any particular feeling tone or emotion? Is it possible now to feel or be aware of the witness, the observer? And can you sense with just for a moment the awareness itself, to be aware of awareness? In these final moments, you might take a moment just to wish yourself well. May your path be filled with ease. May you be guided by the wisdom of your heart. And may all beings in all directions feel safe, feel happy, and feel free from suffering. As you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you so much for your time and attention. These practices are precious, and I really appreciate being able to share this wild and wacky journey with you. Happy trails, and I look forward to seeing you again.